Picture this, a vast desert landscape stretching out beneath you as you soar high above the Peruvian coast. From this incredible vantage point, patterns emerge from the earth itself, colossal shapes etched into the arid ground, some stretching nearly 900 feet across. These aren't random scratches in the desert floor, but an ancient masterpiece created over 2,000 years ago, a mysterious gallery that remains one of archaeology's greatest enigmas. The Nazca Lines have captivated explorers, scientists, and dreamers for generations, their secrets hidden in plain sight, yet resisting explanation century after century. What drove an ancient civilization to create such monumental artworks that can only be fully appreciated from the sky? How did they achieve such precision without modern technology? And perhaps most intriguing of all, why, today, we're embarking on an extraordinary journey to uncover the truth behind these mysterious geoglyphs. We'll be exploring 30 of the most puzzling secrets of the Nazca Lines, each more fascinating than the last. From the mysterious hummingbird and spider figures to the massive trapezoids and straight lines that run for miles across the desert, we'll delve into the theories that have attempted to explain the unexplainable. Were these ancient landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors, as some have suggested, a massive astronomical calendar aligned with the stars, or perhaps a sacred pathway for religious ceremonies connecting the people to their gods? The answers might surprise you, challenging everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations and their capabilities. What makes the Nazca Lines so compelling isn't just their sheer scale or mysterious origins, it's the human story behind them. Imagine the dedication of those ancient artists working under the scorching sun, moving stones and scraping earth to create something meant to last millennia, something they themselves could never see in its full glory. There's a profound connection we feel to these creators across the centuries, a shared sense of wonder and curiosity that transcends time. As we explore these 30 secrets together, you'll discover not just facts about ancient Peru, but insights into human ingenuity, spirituality, and our eternal drive to create meaning in our world. So settle in and prepare to look at these ancient mysteries with fresh eyes. You're about to discover why, after all these years, the Nazca Lines continue to whisper their secrets to those willing to listen. Our journey into the secrets of the Nazca Lines begins with one of the most enduring and scientific theories, championed by a remarkable woman who dedicated her life to their preservation. German mathematician and archaeologist Maria Reiche first encountered the lines in the 1940s, and what began as a scholarly interest quickly blossomed into a lifelong obsession. She saw in these sprawling geoglyphs not random art, but a complex and precise celestial map, a giant astronomical calendar etched into the desert floor. Reiche postulated that the Nazca people, needing to predict seasonal changes for their agriculture in an unforgiving landscape, created these lines to track the movements of the sun, moon, and stars with incredible accuracy. She spent decades living in a small house near the desert, meticulously mapping and measuring the figures, often cleaning them with a broom to keep them visible against the encroaching sand. Her work revealed fascinating alignments. For instance, the large spider glyph is thought to be a representation of the constellation Orion, while many of the long, arrow-straight lines point directly to the rising or setting sun during the solstices or equinoxes. The very shape of some trapezoids and triangles appears to frame certain celestial events, acting as massive sightlines for ancient astronomers. This theory provides a beautifully logical explanation, grounding the lines in a practical, earthly purpose born from survival. It connects the Nazca to countless other ancient cultures, from the builders of Stonehenge to the Maya, who also looked to the heavens to organize their lives and rituals. Yet, even this comprehensive idea isn't without its critics. Some archaeologists point out that while certain alignments exist, not all lines correlate to significant astronomical events, and the theory doesn't fully account for the purpose of the more complex animal figures. Was the entire sprawling network truly just a calendar, or did it serve a dual purpose, intertwining the practical with the profoundly spiritual? Maria Reiche's legacy, however, is undeniable. Her fierce protection of the site saved it from destruction and laid the foundational work for all future research, forever intertwining her story with the very lines she sought to decode. While the idea of a celestial calendar is compelling, another theory grounds the purpose of the Nazca Lines quite literally in the earth beneath our feet. This concept suggests the geoglyphs were part of a vast, sophisticated water map, guiding people to the most precious resource in one of the driest places on Earth. The Nazca Desert receives less than an inch of rain per year, making the location of underground water sources a matter of life and death for its ancient inhabitants. Researcher David Johnson proposed that many of the long, straight lines and trapezoids act as arrows, pointing directly to subterranean aquifers and faults in the bedrock where water would collect. From this perspective, the lines weren't meant for the gods in the sky, but for the survival of the community on the ground. The famous animal figures might then be seen as symbols or markers for specific water deities or the life-giving power of those particular sources. Geological surveys and modern satellite technology have provided some fascinating support for this idea, showing a surprising correlation between the direction of many lines and the locations of actual underground waterways. It transforms our understanding of the lines from a purely spiritual or astronomical endeavor into a monumental public utility project, a communal effort to harness and manage the desert's scarce hydrological resources. This theory beautifully connects the practical needs of a civilization with their spiritual worldview, suggesting that finding water was not just a technical task but a sacred ritual. The act of creating these massive geoglyphs could have been a way to give thanks to the mountain gods or Apu, who are believed to release water from the earth, intertwining engineering with worship. It presents the Nazca people not as star-gazing mystics alone, but as ingenious hydraulic engineers who read the landscape with an intimate knowledge we are only now beginning to appreciate. Moving from the practical need for water, we arrive at a theory that weaves together survival and spirituality into a profound ceremonial practice. Some researchers propose that the Nazca Lines functioned as a vast ritual landscape, a network of sacred pathways used for religious processions and ceremonies. In this view, the act of walking these lines was as important as their final form, a physical journey undertaken to communicate with deities, honor ancestral spirits, or plead with the gods for life-giving water. Imagine groups of people, perhaps priests or community members, moving in single file along the precise edges of a massive trapezoid or tracing the outline of a giant spider under the blazing sun. This wasn't a casual stroll, it was a powerful, kinetic form of prayer. The very dryness of the desert, which made water so precious, would have made this act of walking a potent sacrifice and a demonstration of faith and endurance. The long, straight lines, some running for miles over hills and through valleys, could have served as processional routes leading to ceremonial centers or natural features like mountains, which were considered holy. The animal figures, then, might represent specific deities or spirit animals invoked during these rituals. The hummingbird, a creature known for its incredible speed and energy, could have been linked to a god of vitality, while the spider, a master weaver, might symbolize the interconnectedness of life or the weaving of fate. This theory helps explain the sheer scale of the geoglyphs. They weren't meant to be seen as a whole by people on the ground, but to be experienced step by step, their power felt through the physical act of traversal. The process of creating the lines itself could have been a form of communal ritual, with the entire society participating in a shared spiritual endeavor that strengthened social bonds and affirmed their cultural identity. It transforms the desert from a barren landscape into a consecrated space, a cathedral without walls where every line was an aisle and every figure an altar. This idea doesn't necessarily contradict the water map theory. Instead, it beautifully complements it. A line pointing to an aquifer could also be the path walked to perform a ceremony of gratitude or a ritual to ensure the water's continued flow, merging the practical and the divine into a single, inseparable act of survival and worship. But perhaps no theory about the Nazca Lines has captured the global imagination or sparked more scientific controversy than the idea that they were not made for humans at all, but for visitors from the stars. This extraordinary notion was catapulted into popular culture in the 1960s by Swiss author Erich von Däniken in his best-selling book, Chariots of the Gods. Von Däniken proposed a radical solution to the mystery. The Nazca Plateau was a gigantic airfield, its long, straight lines serving as runways for the spacecraft of ancient astronauts. In this narrative, the intricate animal figures were not religious symbols but signals or messages created by primitive humans under the guidance of their technologically advanced extraterrestrial teachers, meant to be seen from the heavens. The sheer scale and precision of the geoglyphs, which are so difficult to appreciate from the ground, became the central pillar of his argument. How could a people without the ability of flight create such massive, perfect forms unless they were designed for an audience that could fly? The theory tapped directly into a potent mix of mystery and wonder, offering a seemingly simple and thrilling answer to a complex archaeological puzzle. It presented a vision of human history that was far more dramatic and cosmic than gradual cultural development. One where gods were actually aliens and ancient myths were distorted memories of real contact. This idea resonated powerfully with a public fascinated by the growing space race and the possibilities of life on other planets, making von Däniken's book an international phenomenon. Despite its immense popularity, the ancient astronaut hypothesis has been almost universally dismissed by the archaeological community. Scientists point to several fatal flaws in the logic. First, the idea that the lines are runways ignores basic physics. The desert floor is composed of soft, loose soil and gravel, not a solid, paved surface that could support the weight of a massive spacecraft, let alone its landing or takeoff. The wheels of a small airplane would easily become bogged down in the terrain, making the notion of a spaceport utterly impractical. Second, we have overwhelming evidence that the Nazca people were perfectly capable of creating these geoglyphs using simple, well-documented technologies. Researchers have demonstrated that with basic surveying tools like wooden stakes and ropes, a team of people could easily replicate the straight lines and geometric shapes. The animal figures could have been scaled up from small models using a simple grid system, a technique used by artists for millennia. Furthermore, the cultural and artistic context of the Nazca completely undermines the alien guidance theory. The same animal and plant motifs found giant-sized in the desert are prevalent in Nazca pottery and textiles, showing they were deeply embedded symbols within their worldview, not instructions from interstellar visitors. The scientific view is that von Däniken's theory, while entertaining, is a form of archaeological colonialism that unfairly diminishes the ingenuity and sophistication of ancient Native American cultures. It suggests that indigenous people were incapable of such achievements on their own, requiring outside intervention to explain their accomplishments, a perspective that many find not only incorrect but also deeply disrespectful. Yet, the enduring appeal of the alien landing strip theory reveals something fascinating not about the lines themselves, but about us. It highlights a deep human desire for grand, unifying explanations for the unknown. When faced with something as profoundly mysterious as the Nazca Lines, a supernatural answer can sometimes feel more satisfying than a complex, ground-up archaeological one involving hydrology, astronomy, and ritual procession. The theory persists in books, documentaries, and internet forums not because of its evidence, but because of its narrative power. It transforms a dry Peruvian desert into a stage for an interstellar drama, connecting our modern fascination with technology and space to an ancient enigma. In a way, the controversy itself has become part of the secret of the Nazca Lines. It serves as a case study in how different worldviews interpret the same evidence, and a reminder that when we look at ancient mysteries, we often see our own hopes, fears, and imaginations reflected back at us. The lines become a Rorschach test on a planetary scale, and whether one sees a sacred pathway, a water map, or an alien runway may say as much about the viewer as it does about the artists who created them 2,000 years ago. This leads us to one of the most inventive and visually stunning theories, the possibility that the Nazca people did, in fact, see their work from above, not with the help of aliens, but through their own ingenious mastery of the elements. The balloon flight hypothesis suggests that these ancient artists might have taken to the skies using hot air balloons, providing them with a crude but effective aerial platform to direct the construction of their massive geoglyphs. This idea, while speculative, offers an elegant solution to the puzzle of how such precise, large-scale forms were achieved without a view from above. The foundation for this theory lies in the cultural artifacts of the region. On the pottery of the nearby Paracas culture, which predates and is related to the Nazca, there are intriguing designs that some interpret as stylized representations of balloons with gondolas billowing with hot air. Furthermore, the Nazca people were master weavers, producing textiles of incredible fineness and strength from local cotton and camelid wool. They certainly possessed the technical skill to sew large envelopes of fabric, and the nearby coast provided an abundance of seal guano, a fuel that burns at a very high temperature, which could have been used to generate the necessary hot air. The desert conditions would have been ideal for ballooning, with stable, calm air often present in the early mornings. This theory moved from pure speculation into the realm of experimental archaeology in the 1970s with a remarkable project called Nazca. Inspired by the pottery designs and the technical question of how the lines were made, balloonist Julian Knott and archaeologist Jim Woodman set out to prove it was possible. Their mission was to build a balloon using only materials and technologies that would have been available to the Nazca people 2,000 years ago. They gathered reeds from the shores of Lake Titicaca to construct the gondola, woven in a traditional style. For the envelope of the balloon itself, they used native cotton, hand-sewn into a large bag and sealed with a natural gum to make it as airtight as possible. The crucial test came on a November morning in 1975. Using a fire fueled by dry brush and wood, a proxy for the high-temperature burning guano, they filled their balloon, which they named Condor Eye, with hot air. To the astonishment of onlookers and the delight of the creators, the balloon rose into the air, carrying Woodman in the reed gondola. It flew for about 20 minutes, reaching an altitude of several hundred feet and traveling 1.5 miles before landing safely. This dramatic experiment didn't prove that the Nazca did fly, but it demonstrated conclusively that they could have. It showed that the knowledge, materials, and conditions were all present to make ancient human flight a tangible possibility. Of course, this captivating idea faces significant skepticism. No physical evidence of ancient balloons, such as remnants of fabric envelopes or gondolas, has ever been discovered in the archaeological record. Critics argue that the pottery designs interpreted as balloons are just as likely to represent abstract geometric patterns or other symbolic imagery common in Andean art. They also point out that directing a large construction project from a drifting, unstable balloon basket hundreds of feet in the air would be incredibly difficult, even with modern signals, let alone with shouted commands or smoke signals over the desert winds. The flight of the Condor Eye, while impressive, was short and largely uncontrollable, more of a proof of concept for lift than a practical demonstration of aerial surveying. Yet the balloon hypothesis endures because it satisfies a deep human need for a tangible, earth-bound explanation. It champions the resourcefulness of the Nazca people without resorting to extraterrestrial intervention. It paints a breathtaking picture of a lone individual, perhaps a shaman or a master artisan, ascending silently into the dawn sky, the desert floor falling away to reveal the emerging shape of a monkey or a whale, their creation coming into perfect focus for the first and only time. Whether fact or compelling fiction, the image of that ancient balloonist soaring over the desert remains one of the most powerful and poetic visions connected to the enduring mystery of the lines. While the visual spectacle of the lines has captivated us for decades, one of the most fascinating discoveries suggests their power wasn't just meant for the eyes, but for the ears as well. This secret delves into the world of archaeoacoustics, the study of sound in archaeological contexts, and it reveals that the Nazca Plateau might have been a giant, sacred instrument. Researchers have found that the physical structure of the desert itself, particularly the areas surrounding the lines and the geoglyphs' shallow trenches, creates unique acoustic properties. When a person walks along the hard, sun-baked paths that border many of the figures, their footsteps produce a surprising and distinct echo or a resonant hum. In some areas, the act of clapping or chanting can generate strange sonic distortions, the sound waves bouncing off the surrounding hills and the low, stony ridges in unexpected ways. This isn't a random phenomenon. It appears to be a deliberate feature of the landscape's design, turning a simple walk into a vibrational experience. The desert floor acts like a massive drumhead, and the geometric shapes might function as sound amplifiers or waveguides, directing and focusing these auditory effects. This discovery transforms our understanding of the ritual walk theory. It wasn't just a silent, meditative procession. It could have been a deeply sonic and sensory event. Imagine groups of people moving in rhythm along the edge of a trapezoid, their synchronized footsteps and chants creating a low-frequency resonance that could be felt in the chest as much as heard with the ears. This physical vibration would have added an immense layer of power to any ceremony, creating a palpable connection between the participants, the earth, and the spiritual realm. The experience would have been profoundly different from everyday sound, marking the geoglyphs as a special, otherworldly space where the rules of normal perception were altered. For a culture that likely held oral tradition and auditory experience in high regard, the ability to manipulate sound in this way would have been seen as a form of magic or direct communication with the gods. The lines become more than just paths. They are the frets on a giant guitar, the strings of a colossal harp, played not with fingers but with the faithful footsteps of an entire community. This sonic dimension adds a beautiful and complex layer to the mystery, suggesting the Nazca people were master architects of experience, engineering not just visual wonders but auditory ones, crafting a symphony in the sand whose final notes are only now, 2,000 years later, beginning to be heard again. Just when we think the mysteries of the Nazca Plateau have been fully mapped, the desert reveals another one of its long-held secrets, proving that this ancient gallery is far from complete. For decades, the known catalogue of geoglyphs stood at around 300 figures, but the advent of cutting-edge technology is rewriting the map before our very eyes. The most thrilling development in recent years has been the use of drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and satellite imagery with multispectral analysis. These tools allow archaeologists to see what the human eye cannot, scanning vast swaths of desert from above and detecting subtle variations in soil composition and vegetation growth that betray the presence of hidden lines. This isn't just minor tweaking to existing maps, it's a whole new era of discovery, leading to the identification of dozens of previously unknown geoglyphs. These new figures range from intricate humanoid forms to more of the enigmatic animals, each one adding a new piece to the puzzle and forcing us to reconsider the sheer scale and ambition of the entire Nazca project. The poster child for this new wave of discovery emerged quite literally from a hillside in 2019. During a routine maintenance operation to improve access to a popular lookout point, workers spotted some faint, erosion-worn lines on a slope. Archaeologists from the Peruvian Ministry of Culture were called in, and they immediately recognized the potential significance. Using drones to photograph the area, they carefully cleaned and defined the lines, and to the world's amazement, a colossal feline figure emerged, stretching 120 feet across the terrain. This wasn't a simple geometric shape. It was a beautifully rendered cat in profile with a rounded head, long tail curled inwards, and clearly defined paws. The style was immediately telling to experts. Its broader, more fluid lines were characteristic of the Paracas culture, which flourished in the region from around 800 to 100 BCE, predating the main Nazca period by several centuries. This single discovery pushed the origin of the geoglyph tradition back by a huge margin, suggesting the practice of creating massive desert figures began much earlier than previously believed. The cat had been hiding in plain sight for over 2,000 years. Its lines faded and filled in with sediment from centuries of erosion on the unstable hillside, waiting for the right moment and the right technology to be seen again. This find, and others like a procession of humanoid figures discovered by Japanese researchers using artificial intelligence to analyze satellite photos, fundamentally changes our perception of the site. It demonstrates that the Nazca Lines are not a static, fully documented relic, but a living archaeological site still capable of delivering breathtaking surprises. Each new geoglyph is a data point, helping scholars understand the evolution of this artistic tradition over hundreds of years. The stylistic differences between the older Paracas figures and the later classic Nazca glyphs show a fascinating progression in technique and symbolic language. It suggests a long-term, evolving cultural practice that was deeply embedded in the society of this region, not a short-lived fad. Furthermore, the location of these new figures on hillsides, as opposed to the flat desert pampa, indicates the artists were highly adaptable, tailoring their methods to different terrains and perhaps different purposes. A figure on a slope would have been more visible to people on the ground in the valleys below, potentially serving a different communal function than the massive glyphs only visible from high above. The most exciting implication is the promise of future discoveries. Archaeologists estimate that only a fraction of the potential area has been surveyed with this new technology. Vast areas of the Peruvian desert remain unexplored from this high-tech perspective, meaning there could be hundreds more figures waiting to be rediscovered. This turns the mystery of the Nazca Lines into an ongoing investigation, a real-life treasure hunt where the next scan of a drone or the next pass of a satellite could reveal another masterpiece. It's a powerful reminder that the past is not a closed book but a story that is still being written, with each technological advance giving us a new lens through which to view the ingenuity of ancient cultures. The silent desert continues to speak, and we are only just beginning to listen to all it has to say. While these incredible works of art have survived for 2 millennia, they haven't all endured equally. One of the most practical yet profound secrets of the Nazca Lines lies in the puzzle of their differential preservation. Why is it that some figures appear as crisp and clear as the day they were made, while others have faded into near invisibility, only detectable with advanced technology? The answer isn't found in supernatural forces, but in a remarkable and delicate balance of geology, climate, and ancient engineering that has created a natural conservation miracle. The key to this 2,000-year longevity is a fascinating 3-layer sandwich right beneath our feet. The surface of the Nazca Desert isn't just sand. It's a unique pavement of reddish-brown pebbles rich in iron oxide, which have been darkened over centuries by a process called desert varnishing, where minerals from morning mist slowly coat the stones. The ancient artists created the lines by simply removing these top dark stones, revealing a contrasting layer of lighter, sandy-colored subsoil beneath. This act of removal created the visual contrast we see from the air, but the real magic of preservation is in the 3rd layer, beneath that light subsoil is a hard, compact layer of clay-like soil. When the dark stones were removed, this hard pan was exposed to the elements. The relentless sun and the occasional moisture from the coastal mist, known as the garua, baked and hardened this exposed floor, creating a durable, cement-like surface that is highly resistant to erosion. This natural pavement prevents the wind from scooping out the trenches and stops the sides from crumbling, effectively locking the design in place. However, this perfect preservation system is incredibly fragile and depends on a very specific set of desert conditions. The Nazca Plateau is one of the driest places on Earth, with an annual rainfall of less than an inch. This profound aridity is the primary guardian of the lines. With so little rain, there is minimal water erosion to wash away the carefully arranged stones or carve gullies through the designs. Furthermore, the region is shielded by the Andes Mountains, which block strong, destructive winds from the Amazon basin. The winds that do cross the plateau are typically gentle and steady, and they actually play a beneficial role by sweeping away any new sand or dust that might begin to accumulate in the grooves, keeping the lines clean and defined. It's a perfect, silent maintenance system orchestrated by nature itself. This is why the figures on the flat, stable pampa remain so pristine. They exist in a conservationist dream environment. So why have some lines faded? The answer lies in the locations where this delicate balance has been disrupted. Figures on sloping hillsides, like the recently discovered Paracas cat, are far more vulnerable. Even in a dry climate, gravity and the occasional rare downpour work together on an incline. Water runoff, however infrequent, has more force on a slope and can carve tiny channels through the fragile lines, gradually washing away the protective dark stones and eroding the hardened floor. Wind patterns are also more turbulent and variable on uneven terrain, potentially scouring some areas more intensely while allowing sediment to build up and obscure others. Human activity, both ancient and modern, has also played a role. Some areas show evidence of paths created by later cultures walking across the geoglyphs, unintentionally wearing down the edges. In the modern era, the threat is more acute. The Pan-American Highway was built directly through part of the Nazca Plain, severing a lizard glyph in two. While well-intentioned, tourist foot traffic from the early days of exploration before the site was protected also caused damage to the fragile surfaces. Even the sudden, rare rainfall events, which may be increasing due to climate change, now pose a new threat, as seen in 2022 when a freight truck deliberately drove off-road across the plain, leaving deep scars that were then washed out by rain, causing significant damage to 3 of the glyphs. The survival of each line is a testament to its specific location and the unchanging harshness of its environment. The ones that remain perfect are the ones that have been left entirely alone by water, wind, and humanity, resting in a state of arrested decay under the relentless, preserving sun. Perhaps the most humbling secret of the Nazca Lines is the realization that their creation required no alien technology or supernatural intervention, but instead showcases a breathtaking mastery of simple tools and profound human ingenuity. The true enigma isn't how they did it, but how they did it with such flawless precision, using nothing more than basic surveying equipment and mathematical principles that were centuries ahead of their time. The process likely began not in the desert but on a small scale. An artist would first design the figure, perhaps a hummingbird or a monkey, on a much smaller surface, a piece of pottery or a woven textile. This small model was then transferred to the desert floor using a sophisticated scaling system. Researchers believe the Nazca used a unit of measurement, possibly based on the human stride or a standard cord length, to create a massive grid over the intended area. By dividing their small model into a corresponding grid of squares, they could systematically scale up each segment of the design onto the larger grid on the ground. A single point on the hummingbird's beak in the small drawing would have a specific coordinate, say, 5 units across and 3 units up. on the desert floor, that same point would be translated to 50 or 100 units across and 30 or 60 units up, depending on the chosen scale. Teams of workers would then use long ropes and wooden stakes to mark these key points, slowly connecting them to form the outline of the colossal figure. The creation of the long, perfectly straight lines that run for miles over hills and valleys reveals an even more astonishing grasp of geometry. To achieve this without modern laser levels or theodolites, the Nazca likely employed a simple yet brilliant technique using a series of sighting posts. They would have begun by driving two tall stakes into the ground at either end of the intended line. A third person would then position themselves behind the first stake, looking past it to instruct a fourth person holding a third stake to move left or right until all three stakes were in perfect alignment. This process would be repeated over and over, moving forward stake by stake to create a perfectly straight visual path across the undulating terrain. For the massive geometric shapes like trapezoids and triangles, this method would be adapted to create precise angles. By understanding basic Pythagorean principles, even if they didn't call it that, they could use ropes of specific lengths to create perfect right angles. A rope knotted at intervals to create a 3-4-5 ratio, for instance, when stretched tight between three stakes, will always form a perfect right angle. This knowledge allowed them to lay out the sharp, clean edges of these huge forms with mathematical certainty. The actual physical act of creating the lines was remarkably straightforward. Once the design was staked out, teams of workers would simply remove the dark, iron-oxidized stones from the surface and pile them along the edges of the lines, exposing the lighter-colored sand beneath. This created the stark visual contrast. The hard subsoil, once exposed to the sun and occasional mist, would cement into a durable surface, locking the design in place for millennia. This entire process was a monumental feat of organization and communal effort, a society-wide project that required planners, mathematicians, and a large labor force all working in concert. It demonstrates that the true marvel of the Nazca Lines is not mysticism, but the incredible power of the human mind to solve complex problems with elegant, simple solutions. Moving from the remarkable engineering of the lines, we arrive at a secret etched not in geometry but in biology, the profound mystery of the animal symbolism. The Nazca didn't choose their subjects at random. Each creature, from the colossal spider to the graceful hummingbird, was a deliberate and deeply meaningful selection, a key to understanding their spiritual worldview. To decipher these figures, we must look beyond the desert floor and into the vibrant art and artifacts they left behind. The same animals that dominate the geoglyphs are repeated endlessly on Nazca pottery and exquisite textiles, telling us these were not mere decorations but powerful, recurring symbols central to their culture. The hummingbird, with its incredible speed and ability to hover and fly backwards, was likely a symbol of resurrection and energy. Its long beak and capability to travel vast distances may have linked it to the life-giving nectar of flowers and, by extension, to fertility and the essential pollination that sustained the ecosystem. In a desert environment, such a vibrant burst of life would have been seen as nothing short of miraculous. The spider figure, one of the most intricate and precise of all the geoglyphs, holds a particularly fascinating secret. Researchers have noted that the glyph accurately depicts a spider species known as Ricinulae, a rare arachnid found only in the deepest, most remote parts of the Amazon rainforest. This is a creature the Nazca people, living in a coastal desert, would almost certainly never have encountered in their daily lives. Its presence suggests a deep, possibly ritualistic knowledge of distant ecosystems. Furthermore, the spider is a universal symbol of rain and water in many Andean cultures. Its web, gleaming with morning dew, mimics a net catching precious water droplets. For a people whose survival hinged on predicting and pleading for rainfall, the spider glyph could have been a massive, permanent prayer for water, a plea woven into the very fabric of the desert to the gods who controlled the rains. Then there is the monkey, a figure discovered with a curiously spiraled tail. Found hundreds of miles from any natural jungle habitat, its presence is perhaps the most telling clue. The monkey is a creature of the lush, water-rich Amazon. Its depiction on the dry Nazca Plain is a powerful invocation of a fertile, watery world, everything the Nazca lack. The spiral tail is especially significant as it mirrors the shape of whirlpools and vortices, further strengthening its connection to water. This wasn't just a picture of an animal, it was a shamanic act of sympathetic magic, an attempt to draw the essence of the water-rich jungle and its creatures into their arid homeland. The monkey, the hummingbird, and the orca, another glyph depicting a deep water predator, all point to a cosmology that reached far beyond their desert borders. They reveal a people intensely aware of different ecological zones, from the deep ocean to the high Andes and the distant Amazon rainforest. These animals were likely seen as powerful spirit helpers or manifestations of deities governing those distant, life-sustaining realms. By etching their forms into the earth, the Nazca were perhaps attempting to harness their power, to create a spiritual conduit between their barren world and these distant fonts of fertility and water, weaving a connection across vast geographical divides through faith and stone. While the animal figures capture our imagination, the true backbone of the Nazca Plateau is its vast network of straight lines, a feature that is arguably more mysterious than the representational glyphs. Scattered across the desert are hundreds of these perfectly straight paths, some running for incredible distances of up to 30 miles, cutting across the terrain with an unwavering precision that defies the natural curves of the hills and valleys they traverse. Unlike the animal figures, which are concentrated in a central area, these lines fan out in all directions, creating a sprawling web of geometric intent. For decades, their purpose was one of the most baffling aspects of the entire mystery. They clearly weren't roads in any conventional sense. Many are too narrow for practical travel, and they often lead to dead ends or simply stop in the middle of nowhere. This very impracticality is what fueled the more exotic theories, like von Däniken's idea of alien runways. But as with the other secrets of Nazca, the truth is far more grounded and reveals a deep, sophisticated understanding of the landscape. The most compelling earthly explanation brings us back to the most precious resource in the desert: water. Researcher David Johnson's pioneering work suggests that these lines are not random, but form a vast hydrological map pointing directly to sources of life-giving water. In this theory, the lines function as giant arrows or sight lines. Many of them originate from small hills or mounds and point directly toward the distant Andes Mountains, the ultimate source of water through seasonal snowmelt. Johnson and others have documented a fascinating correlation. The endpoints of these lines often align precisely with faults in the underlying bedrock or with the openings of aquifers where water would naturally collect underground. The Nazca, through generations of observation, learned to read the subtle signs of the desert to locate these vital sources. The lines then served a dual purpose. On a practical level, they could physically guide people from their settlements toward these known water collection points. On a ceremonial level, they may have marked the sacred direction of the water's origin, honoring the mountain gods or Apu, who are believed to control the flow of streams and the filling of aquifers. This transforms the lines from mere paths into profound statements of survival, connecting every community to the source of its existence. Simultaneously, the astronomical theory championed by Maria Reiche also provides a powerful lens through which to view these linear wonders. Reiche meticulously documented that a significant number of these straight lines align with the rising or setting points of the sun, moon, and key stars during major celestial events like the solstices and equinoxes. From this perspective, the desert becomes a colossal observatory, a specific line pointing to the spot on the horizon where the sun rises on the June solstice would have been a critical calendar marker, signaling the time to plant or prepare for seasonal changes. This knowledge was essential for agriculture in such an unforgiving environment. The lines could have been used by priests or astronomers as fixed visual guides, allowing them to predict these events with remarkable accuracy year after year. The combination of the hydrological and astronomical theories presents a beautifully integrated worldview. A single line could point both to a critical water source and to a major celestial event, weaving together the practical need for survival with a cosmic understanding of the cycles that govern their world. The straight lines of Nazca are not a mystery with a single answer, but a testament to a culture that saw no separation between the earth and the sky, between the search for water and the worship of the forces that provided it. Amidst the sprawling network of lines and intricate animal figures, some of the most imposing features on the Nazca Plateau are the enormous trapezoidal clearings. These vast open areas, some stretching over 600 feet in length, are not merely the absence of lines but are carefully constructed geometric formations in their own right. Created using the same technique of stone removal, their sheer scale is almost incomprehensible from the ground. To stand at the edge of one is to gaze across a giant, flat field of light-colored earth, meticulously cleared and bordered by raised banks of the darker stones that were painstakingly piled along its perimeter. Their precision is staggering. The sides run perfectly straight and parallel for hundreds of feet before tapering to a slightly narrower end, creating a shape that is both monumental and geometrically perfect. Unlike the animal glyphs, which feel like art, the trapezoids feel like architecture. They define space rather than just occupy it. This sense of deliberate construction is the key to unlocking their probable function, pointing toward a use that was not just symbolic but profoundly social and ceremonial. The most widely accepted theory for these colossal clearings is that they served as grand gathering spaces for public rituals and community ceremonies. Their immense, flat, and open nature would have been ideally suited for accommodating large groups of people. Imagine the entire community of a Nazca settlement converging on one of these trapezoids for a major seasonal festival, a religious observance, or a rite of passage. The flat, prepared surface would have provided a stage for performances, dances, or processions, while the gently sloping sides of the surrounding terrain would have functioned as a natural amphitheater, allowing those not on the main floor to still witness the events unfolding within. The trapezoid's shape itself may have held significance, perhaps funneling participants toward a specific focal point, an altar, a priest, or a sacred offering at the narrower end of the formation. This architectural design would have naturally directed movement and attention, choreographing the ceremony even before it began. The acoustic properties we discussed earlier would have been amplified here. The hard, flat surface and the stone borders could have helped project the sound of chants, music, or oration, ensuring the entire gathered crowd could hear and feel the power of the ritual. Another compelling angle connects these trapezoids directly to the lifeblood of the culture: water. Many of these large geometric clearings are situated at the base of hills or mountains, precisely where seasonal water would flow down after rare rains in the high Andes. In this context, the trapezoid may have functioned as a massive catchment basin. Its wide, open mouth would have been designed to capture and channel this precious runoff, directing it into subterranean filtration galleries or nearby agricultural fields. This transforms the trapezoid from a purely ceremonial space into a multi-functional piece of community infrastructure. The ritual gathering held within it could then have been a ceremony of gratitude for the water it collected, or a petition to the mountain gods for the rains to come. This beautifully merges the practical and the spiritual, a concept central to the Nazca worldview. The act of maintaining the clearing, of keeping its surface hard and its borders defined, would have been a continuous act of communal devotion and practical maintenance, ensuring the structure was ready to both host a sacred event and capture a life-giving resource. The true genius of the trapezoid formations lies in this potential duality. They were likely both cathedral and reservoir, a place where the community came together to celebrate the very forces that allowed them to survive in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. To truly understand the language of the desert, we must look inside the Nazca home. The same creatures that stalk and soar across the vast plateau are found in miniature, painted with exquisite detail on the pottery that was a cornerstone of their daily and ceremonial life. This is not a coincidence. It is a direct and powerful connection that reveals the geoglyphs were not an isolated anomaly, but a massive, public extension of a deeply ingrained artistic and symbolic tradition. The Nazca were master ceramicists, producing vessels of remarkable beauty and complexity. On these pots, we find an entire bestiary mirrored in the desert. The hummingbird, the killer whale, the monkey, and the spider, all rendered in the same distinctive style. This parallel artistry provides a crucial key to decoding the glyphs' meanings. The symbols that held power in their domestic and ritual objects were the same ones they deemed important enough to etch into the very skin of the earth on a monumental scale. The desert was their ultimate canvas, and the geoglyphs were their most profound and permanent statements of belief. This connection goes beyond mere subject matter and delves into the very technique of creation. The process of making a Nazca pot involved a meticulous layering of colors and the precise removal of material to reveal a contrasting base layer, a method that is a direct, small-scale analog to how the lines were made. Just as the potter would scrape away a dark slip to reveal the light-colored clay beneath to form a design, teams of workers on the pampa removed the dark surface stones to expose the lighter subsoil, creating the stark visual contrast. This suggests that the concept of creating art through subtraction, of revealing an image by removing what surrounds it, was a fundamental principle in Nazca aesthetics. It was a technique they applied from the intimacy of a handheld vessel to the grand communal project of shaping their landscape. The geoglyphs can be seen as the magnified brushstrokes of an entire culture, using the land itself as their clay and simple tools as their brushes. Furthermore, this link to ceramics helps dismantle the argument that the Nazca needed outside help or aerial views to create their designs. The artists who painted these intricate, perfectly symmetrical animal figures on curved pot surfaces did so with an innate sense of proportion and scale, mastering complex designs within a confined space. If they could conceptualize and execute a perfect spiral or a balanced, intricate creature on a rounded surface without a view from above, scaling that same design up onto the desert floor using a simple grid system would have been a logical, if ambitious, extension of their existing skills. The pottery acts as the blueprint, the proof of concept that the knowledge and artistic vision existed entirely within their culture. The story doesn't end with clay. The Nazca were perhaps even more renowned for their textiles, weaving fabrics of such incredible fineness and complexity that they are considered some of the best ever produced in the ancient world. Here, the connection to the geoglyphs becomes even more tantalizing. Many scholars propose that the vast desert figures may have acted as giant pattern templates or looms for textile production. The long, straight lines and geometric shapes bear a striking resemblance to the warp threads stretched out on a loom. The animal figures could have served as enormous design patterns, with their outlines providing a full-scale guide for weaving complex motifs into tapestries or garments. This theory presents a breathtaking image, entire communities working together on a colossal loom, perhaps laying out threads along the lines or using the shapes as a visual guide for weaving smaller versions. The act of walking the lines, as we discussed in the ritual theory, could have been part of a ceremonial process of weaving the design into existence, a physical prayer made manifest in the landscape before being translated into wearable art. This beautifully ties the geoglyphs to another pinnacle of Nazca cultural achievement, suggesting the desert itself was a workshop, a sacred space where art, spirituality, and daily life were woven together into an inseparable whole. The lines become threads in a grand tapestry of meaning, connecting the earth to the home and the community to their gods. Yet for all their resilience over 2 millennia, the Nazca lines now face a convergence of modern threats that pose the most serious danger to their survival since their creation. The very environmental stability that preserved them for so long is being undermined by human activity and a changing climate, creating a race against time to protect these irreplaceable treasures. One of the most immediate dangers comes from illegal gold mining operations that have proliferated in the surrounding hills. These clandestine mines use heavy machinery and toxic chemicals like mercury to extract gold, causing deforestation and destroying the delicate hydrological balance of the entire region. The mining process creates erosion that sends sediment washing down onto the plain, potentially burying lines or altering the drainage patterns that have protected them for centuries. Perhaps even more alarming is how some miners have deliberately driven their trucks across the protected area, leaving deep tire ruts that scar the ancient designs. In 2023, such an incident caused significant damage to 3 geoglyphs when subsequent rainfall turned these man-made tracks into erosion gullies, permanently altering the ancient artwork. Climate change presents another insidious threat, disrupting the delicate desert equilibrium that has been the line's greatest protector. While the Nazca Desert has always been dry, climate models suggest the region may experience more extreme weather events, including rare but powerful rainfalls. When rain does fall on this landscape unaccustomed to water, it can be devastating. Instead of gentle absorption, the water runs off the hard surface, gathering force and carving new channels that can slice through ancient designs, washing away the dark protective stones and undermining the stability of the figures. The famous hummingbird glyph has already suffered damage to its beak from such water erosion. Rising temperatures and shifting wind patterns may also increase dust storms that could gradually bury the lines under layers of sediment, obscuring them from view and making them more vulnerable to damage from future human activity that might unknowingly build on top of them. Even the well-intentioned desire to see these wonders creates its own preservation challenges. While regulated tourism provides essential funds for conservation, the early days of unrestricted access caused significant harm. Before protective measures were implemented, tourists would freely walk across the lines, their footsteps eroding the fragile edges and leaving paths that are still visible today. The Pan-American Highway, built directly through the Nazca Plain, literally cut a large lizard glyph in half, demonstrating how development often proceeded without adequate archaeological assessment. Low-flying aircraft from tour companies generate vibrations that may contribute to the gradual displacement of stones, while the occasional emergency landing or accident poses an immediate catastrophic risk. The challenge is balancing public access and education with the absolute necessity of preservation, a difficult equation that conservationists continue to work to solve. Thankfully, a dedicated coalition of archaeologists, the Peruvian government, and international organizations is fighting back with sophisticated conservation strategies. The establishment of the Nazca Archaeological Zone and its designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site has provided crucial legal protection and funding. On-the-ground efforts involve meticulous monitoring using GPS and photogrammetry to detect even the slightest changes to the lines over time. To combat erosion, conservation teams use traditional methods, literally sweeping accumulated dust from the grooves with brooms, much as Maria Reiche did decades ago, combined with modern technology like moisture sensors to monitor the soil conditions. Perhaps most importantly, education and community engagement programs work with local residents to become guardians of their heritage, creating economic incentives through responsible tourism that make preservation in everyone's interest. Drone technology and satellite monitoring now provide a powerful tool against illegal mining and encroachment, allowing authorities to detect suspicious activity in real time across the vast desert. The story of the Nazca Lines is no longer just about understanding the past, but about undertaking a collective responsibility to ensure these magnificent creations survive to inspire wonder for generations to come. Just a short journey north from the famous Nazca Plateau lies another, often overlooked desert canvas that holds crucial clues to solving the mystery, the Nazca Lines. Created by the Paracas culture, the direct predecessors to the Nazca, these geoglyphs present a fascinating contrast in style, purpose, and execution, offering archaeologists a before and after snapshot of a tradition in dramatic evolution. Where the Nazca figures are renowned for their precise, almost technical perfection, the Palpa glyphs feel more organic, more human. They are frequently etched into the sides of hills rather than on the flat desert floor, making them far more visible to people standing in the valleys below. This fundamental difference in location hints at a profound shift in intended audience. The Paracas designs were meant to be seen and experienced by the community on the ground, while the later Nazca figures seem designed for a viewpoint from above, whether divine or aerial. The Palpa figures include numerous humanoid forms, often referred to as anthropomorphs, something almost entirely absent in the classic Nazca repertoire. These stylized people, some with elaborate headdresses, appear to be dancing or engaging in ritual acts, bringing a clear narrative and human element to the landscape that the more abstract Nazca animal glyphs lack. The stylistic differences are equally telling. The Paracas lines are generally broader and shallower, created by clearing areas rather than defining sharp, single lines. Their figures, including impressive depictions of a solar disk and a complex design known as the star, have a more expressive, almost painterly quality compared to the precise, almost drafted line quality of the Nazca hummingbird or spider. This isn't a matter of one being better than the other. It's a record of changing artistic priorities and techniques. The Paracas method involved creating figures by removing stones from larger areas to form silhouettes, while the Nazca refined the technique into one of outline and detail. This evolution suggests a move from symbolic, communal art towards more complex, potentially specialized endeavors requiring greater planning and mathematical precision. Studying the Palpa lines allows us to see the foundational layer of this incredible tradition, the cultural bedrock upon which the Nazca built their own unique legacy. It reveals that the impulse to mark the earth was not a sudden Nazca invention, but a deep-seated cultural practice that was inherited, adapted, and magnified over centuries. What the Palpa comparison ultimately provides is a powerful argument against any single, sudden explanation for the geoglyphs, such as extraterrestrial influence. Instead, it paints a picture of gradual, indigenous cultural development. We can trace a clear lineage from the Paracas people creating visible, human-centric figures on hillsides for community rituals, to the Nazca, who took that same tradition and scaled it up to a monumental level, refined the techniques with mathematical precision, and shifted the symbolism towards the natural world and the cosmos. The Nazca didn't emerge from a vacuum. They stood on the shoulders of giants, refining and reinterpreting a sacred practice that was already ancient in their own time. The Palpa lines are the missing link in this story, proving that the Nazca lines are not an inexplicable anomaly, but the spectacular pinnacle of a long, evolving, and entirely human artistic and spiritual journey. Among the vast bestiary of animal figures that dominate the Nazca Plateau, a few enigmatic humanoid forms stand out, not for their size but for their profound mystery. The most famous of these is the figure often called the astronaut, a starkly unique geoglyph that seems to break all the established rules of Nazca artistry. Located on a steep hillside near the plain, this 30-meter-tall figure appears to be waving, with one arm raised and one arm lowered. But it's the head that has captured the world's imagination and fueled endless speculation, a perfectly round, featureless shape that looks unmistakably like a modern astronaut's helmet. This single image, so out of place among the monkeys and hummingbirds, became a cornerstone for the ancient astronaut theory, seemingly offering pictorial proof that the Nazca people had encountered beings from another world. The figure's isolated location on a slope, making it clearly visible from the ground below, only adds to its otherworldly aura, as if it were placed there specifically to be seen and remembered by the people in the valley. Yet, to understand this figure, we must once again look to the cultural context rather than the cosmos. Archaeologists point out that the so-called helmet is far more likely a stylized representation of a severed head, a grim but powerful symbol deeply rooted in the ritual practices of Andean cultures. For the Nazca and their predecessors, the head was considered the seat of life force and power. The practice of trophy head-taking was a well-documented part of their culture, not as a mere act of war, but as a deeply religious ritual believed to harness the vitality of a powerful enemy or appease the gods to ensure agricultural fertility and water. Nazca pottery frequently depicts warriors holding severed heads, and actual mummified trophy heads have been found in Nazca burials, often with a cord inserted through the forehead for carrying. From this perspective, the astronaut is not a spaceman, but a shaman or a deity figure holding immense spiritual power, symbolized by the oversized severed head it carries. The figure's location on a hillside, visible to all, might have served as a permanent, monumental reminder of this power, a warning to enemies, and a symbol of a covenant with the gods to sustain the community. Beyond the astronaut, other humanoid figures add layers to this mystery. A more recently discovered geoglyph depicts a pair of stylized human figures with wide, rectangular heads and what appear to be striped bodies, almost like simple wooden dolls. Another shows a figure with multiple fingers splayed out, a detail that could be symbolic rather than literal. These representations are consistently abstract and symbolic, never realistic portraits. They lack the intricate biological accuracy of the animal figures, suggesting that depicting humans carried a different, more ritualistic weight. They weren't meant to represent an individual, but an idea, a dancer in a ceremony, a mythological ancestor, or a deity. The rectangular heads on some of these figures could represent elaborate ceremonial masks or headdresses worn in rituals, transforming the wearer into a conduit for the divine. This interpretation grounds the strange humanoid figures firmly in the known spiritual world of the Nazca. They are not records of alien visitors, but expressions of a complex belief system where the human form was a vessel for supernatural power, where shamans could transcend the ordinary, and where the boundaries between the human, the animal, and the divine were fluid and constantly negotiated through ritual. These enigmatic figures, therefore, are perhaps the most personal of all the geoglyphs, giving us a fleeting, symbolic glimpse into how the Nazca saw their own place within the vast and powerful cosmos they inscribed upon their desert home. This intricate connection to the landscape reveals yet another layer of their sophisticated design, where the geoglyphs on the flat desert floor were just one part of a much grander, integrated system. The Nazca people didn't just see the pampa as a blank canvas, they viewed the entire horizon as a sacred frame for their creations. Certain long, arrow-straight lines, which might seem to wander aimlessly across the desert when viewed in isolation, actually point with uncanny precision towards specific, distant mountain peaks and volcanoes that dot the Andean skyline. These aren't random alignments. The endpoints of these lines often mark the exact spot from which a particular snow-capped summit, like Mount Korapuna, becomes perfectly framed, or a specific volcanic cone aligns with a solstice sunrise. This transforms the entire region into a massive, interconnected ritual complex, where the man-made lines on the ground acted as spiritual and visual pathways connecting the community to the powerful deities believed to reside in those lofty, holy places. In the Andean worldview, mountains, or Apu, were not just geological features, they were living, conscious gods. They were the source of life-giving water, the controllers of weather, and the protectors of the people. By creating physical lines that pointed directly to these deities, the Nazca were forging a permanent, unbreakable link between their world and the divine. A ceremony performed at the base of such a line would have been conducted in the direct sightline of the mountain god, the path itself acting as a conduit for prayers and offerings. This practice of geographical alignment shows a profound understanding of their environment, requiring generations of careful observation to note exactly where the sun rose or set behind a specific peak on a significant day, and then translating that celestial relationship into a permanent earthly marker. It suggests that priests or astronomers would have used these lines as fixed sighting devices, standing at one end to observe and predict important seasonal events based on the sun's movement against the mountainous backdrop. This holistic approach answers a persistent question about the lines. Why create something so massive you can't see it? The answer is that they weren't meant to be seen all at once by human eyes. Their power was in the experience of alignment and connection. A person walking the line would be physically enacting a journey toward the sacred Apu, their movement a form of pilgrimage. From the correct vantage point at the beginning of the path, their gaze would be funneled along the straight edges, directing their attention and their devotion toward the distant, powerful mountain. This turns the entire desert into a ritual landscape where every line tells a story, every path leads to a god, and the very act of traversing the land becomes a deeply spiritual practice, binding the people to the eternal, unchanging forces of the earth and sky that sustain them. This profound connection to the life-giving power of water leads us to one of the most compelling and well-supported theories about the Nazca Lines, the idea that they were the central feature of a vast, sophisticated water cult. In a landscape where survival was a constant negotiation with absolute aridity, water wasn't just a resource, it was a deity, a magical force to be pleaded with, thanked, and appeased. The geoglyphs in this view were not merely art or calendars, but a monumental and desperate form of prayer etched directly into the skin of the earth, a permanent ritual landscape designed to communicate with the gods who controlled the rains and the underground rivers. The evidence for this is woven throughout the very fabric of the desert and the culture that thrived there against all odds. The most direct link is found in the animal figures themselves, which consistently represent creatures intrinsically tied to water in Nazca mythology. The killer whale, or orca, is a powerful example. This deep ocean predator was a dominant figure in Nazca art, frequently depicted on pottery and textiles, often shown with a trophy head in its mouth, symbolizing its immense power and authority. For a coastal people, the orca was a master of the watery realm, a deity that could command the bounty of the sea. By carving its image into the desert, the Nazca were perhaps attempting to draw that power inland, to invoke the essence of water itself into their parched world. Similarly, the monkey, with its spiraled tail, is a creature of the dense, rain-soaked Amazon. Its presence hundreds of miles from its natural habitat is a profound act of sympathetic magic, a plea to bring the fertility and moisture of the jungle to the desert. Even the spider, with its web that glistens with morning dew, was a near-universal symbol for rain and water capture in Andean cultures. Each animal glyph can be read as a specific invocation, a tailored prayer to a different aspect of the water cycle they so desperately depended on. This spiritual practice was almost certainly led by a powerful class of shamans or priests who acted as intermediaries between the people and the capricious water gods. These ritual specialists would have been the architects of the ceremonies performed on and around the lines. We can imagine them leading processions along the straight pathways that point toward the distant, water-giving mountains, the Apu. At the end of these processions, at the foot of a massive trapezoid or before the gaze of a giant monkey, they would have performed elaborate ceremonies. These likely involved offerings of food, precious spondylus shells which were associated with rain and fertility, and perhaps even human sacrifices or the ritual consumption of hallucinogenic brews like those made from the San Pedro cactus. These substances would have allowed the shaman to transcend the physical world, to journey into the spirit realm and negotiate directly with the deities, begging them to fill the aquifers and send life-giving runoff down from the Andes. The theory is powerfully supported by the hydrological map concept. The straight lines that align with underground water sources transform from practical guides into sacred pathways. A line pointing to a subterranean aquifer wasn't just a direction to dig, it was a divine arrow, a testament to the location of a spiritual wellspring. The act of creating and maintaining that line was a continuous act of devotion to the god that provided that water. The trapezoids, functioning as both ceremonial plazas and water catchment basins, become the perfect physical manifestation of this belief, a space where the community gathered to worship the very resource that the space itself was designed to collect. In the world of the Nazca, there was no division between the practical and the spiritual. Finding water was a religious experience, engineering was an act of worship. The Nazca Lines were the ultimate expression of this worldview, a desperate and beautiful symphony of faith carved into the desert, each line and figure a lasting note in an eternal song for rain. But beyond the symbolic and spiritual interpretations lies a secret that speaks to the very intellect of the Nazca people, one that is etched into the desert with breathtaking mathematical perfection. The geometric precision of their designs is nothing short of astounding, revealing a sophisticated grasp of mathematical principles that seems to defy their era. We are not looking at rough approximations or freehand sketches scaled up. We are witnessing the work of master geometers who could execute near-perfect circles, flawless spirals, and immense triangles with sides that run arrow-straight for miles over uneven terrain without deviating even a fraction of a degree. This level of accuracy, achieved without theodolites, lasers, or even the ability to view their work from above, is a testament to a profound and systematic understanding of geometry that was almost certainly passed down through generations of specialized knowledge keepers. The creation of a perfect circle hundreds of feet in diameter on flat ground is challenging enough, but the Nazca managed this feat on slopes and inclines, adjusting their calculations to account for the curvature of the land and maintaining the visual integrity of the shape from a perspective they could never physically occupy. This suggests an abstract mathematical mind capable of conceptualizing forms in 3 dimensions and translating them onto a complex, undulating canvas. This precision is most spectacularly displayed in one of the most complex glyphs of all, the massive spiral attached to a long, straight line, often nicknamed the socket. This design is a mathematical marvel, a continuous, unbroken logarithmic spiral whose curvature follows a precise mathematical progression. Creating such a form requires an understanding of fixed points, radii, and consistent rates of expansion, a concept that feels more akin to a classroom blackboard than an ancient desert floor. The straight line connected to it is not just appended, it aligns perfectly with the spiral's center, demonstrating an intentional and sophisticated relationship between linear and curvilinear geometry. Similarly, the vast trapezoids exhibit a stunning symmetry, their long, parallel sides maintaining a consistent width across hundreds of feet before tapering at identical angles to form the trapezoid's point. There is no sign of the fudging or correction one might expect from an immense handmade project. The edges are clean, sharp, and unwavering, as if drawn by a giant's compass. How was this humanly possible? The answer lies not in alien technology, but in the ingenious application of simple tools and fundamental mathematical truths. Researchers believe the Nazca relied on a basic but brilliantly effective unit of measurement, likely based on a standard length of rope or a repeated human pace. This standardized unit allowed for perfect scaling and replication. To create a perfect right angle, the foundation of so many of their shapes, they almost certainly used the principle of the 3-4-5 Pythagorean triangle, a method known to ancient builders across the world. By stretching a rope with knots marking 3 units, 4 units, and 5 units, and then forming a triangle with those lengths, the angle between the 3-unit and 4-unit sides will always be a perfect 90 degrees. This simple trick, using nothing more than a knotted cord, allowed them to lay out the precise corners of their massive trapezoids and triangles. For their magnificent spirals and circles, the method was equally elegant. A central stake with a long rope would serve as a giant compass. Workers would hold the rope taut and walk in a circle, removing stones to mark the circumference. A gradual, systematic shortening of the rope with each revolution would create a perfect spiral. The sheer scale of these operations required immense coordination, with teams of workers acting as living, breathing drafting tools, their movements choreographed by a master surveyor who held the mathematical blueprint in their mind. This mathematical prowess transforms our perception of the Nazca from a mysterious, spiritual culture into a society of intellectual giants, whose legacy is not just one of faith, but of genius written in stone and sand. The desert's magic truly comes alive when we consider not just what the Nazca created, but when they intended for it to be seen. Certain figures hold a hidden dimension that only reveals itself under specific celestial conditions, suggesting their creators were not just master artists and engineers, but also brilliant choreographers of light and shadow. The angle of the sun, which shifts dramatically between the summer and winter solstices, plays a crucial role in how these geoglyphs are perceived. During the early morning and late afternoon hours around the December solstice, the low-hanging sun in the southern hemisphere casts long, deep shadows across the desert floor. This specific lighting can dramatically enhance the three-dimensionality of the lines, making the edges of the trenches appear sharper, and the overall figures stand out with a startling clarity that is muted under the harsh, overhead midday sun. It's as if the figures are waking up or stepping into focus for a special performance timed with the solar calendar. This wasn't a happy accident, it was almost certainly a feature of the design. The Nazca's deep understanding of astronomy, which informed their potential use of the lines as a calendar, would have made them intimately aware of these seasonal light changes. They could have planned the depth, width, and orientation of their trenches specifically to capitalize on these dramatic shadow effects. A glyph might be oriented so that the first light of the dawn on the winter solstice perfectly highlights its form, or so that the setting sun on the summer solstice elongates its shadow to an incredible length, creating a transient, amplified version of itself that slinks across the pampa. This transforms the geoglyphs from static images into dynamic, time-based art. A figure that appears relatively flat and unassuming for most of the year might, for a few precious days or weeks, become a deeply pronounced and awe-inspiring sight, its presentation timed to coincide with a major ceremonial event or an important seasonal change. This insight adds a powerful new layer to our understanding of Nazca ceremonies. We can imagine the community gathering at a specific time of year, perhaps at sunrise or sunset on a solstice, and processing along a pathway to a vantage point where a specific glyph was designed to be seen at its most spectacular. The ceremony would have been a multisensory experience, the physical act of walking, the sound of chants echoing across the acoustic landscape, and the breathtaking visual reveal of a giant animal figure, perfectly illuminated and shadowed by the solstice sun, appearing as if by magic from the desert. This wasn't just art, it was ritual theater on a geological scale, with the sun serving as the ultimate spotlight. The Nazca didn't just build their calendar into the alignments of the lines, they encoded it into the very visibility of their gods, ensuring that their most powerful symbols would manifest in their full glory only at the most spiritually significant moments of the year. Looking out across the stark Nazca Desert, it's impossible not to feel the profound presence of the eternal. The same landscape that holds the sprawling geoglyphs is also dotted with the silent, sandy mounds of ancient cemeteries, creating a powerful and intimate link between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Many of the most significant lines and figures are found in close proximity to these burial sites, suggesting a connection that is both practical and deeply spiritual, weaving the geoglyphs into the very fabric of the Nazca understanding of life, death, and what lies beyond. These cemeteries or necropolises were not hidden away. They were integrated into the ritual landscape, with the lines acting as sacred pathways connecting the community of the living with the ancestors who watched over them. Imagine a funeral procession moving slowly along one of the long, straight tracks, the mourners walking a path that pointed toward a distant, sacred mountain, believed to be the home of the gods and the final resting place of the soul. This physical journey across the desert would have mirrored the symbolic journey the deceased was believed to be undertaking, moving from the earthly plane to the spiritual world. The theory that the lines served as funerary pathways is supported by the sheer number of them that lead directly to or from burial grounds. It's as if the lines themselves were umbilical cords tying the living to the dead, routes for communication and veneration. The trapezoidal clearings, which we discussed as potential ceremonial plazas, could have served as gathering spaces for these funeral rites, where the community would come together to honor the departed, perhaps leaving offerings of food, pottery, or textiles to accompany them on their journey. The acoustic properties of these spaces would have amplified the sounds of mourning chants and music, making the ceremonies intensely powerful and communal experiences. This practice transforms the geoglyphs from abstract astronomical markers into deeply human monuments, created for and used in the most significant and emotional moments of a community's life. The animal figures themselves take on a new, poignant meaning in this funerary context. In many ancient cultures, specific animals were seen as psychopomps, spiritual guides that escorted the souls of the dead to the afterlife. The monkey, a creature from the lush, water-rich Amazon, could symbolize a journey to a fertile, paradisiacal realm. The hummingbird, with its incredible speed and energy, might represent the swift flight of the soul leaving the body. The spider, a master weaver, could be seen as weaving the fate of the deceased or the tapestry of the cosmos into which the soul would be welcomed. By creating these giant animal forms near burial sites, the Nazca may have been invoking these powerful spirit guides, ensuring a safe passage for their loved ones. It was a permanent, monumental prayer etched into the earth, a plea to the natural world to care for the souls of the departed. This connection is made even more tangible by the burial practices of the Nazca themselves. They were renowned for their intricate textiles, and they often wrapped their dead in multiple layers of beautifully woven shrouds, creating mummy bundles that were then buried with offerings. The motifs on these textiles and the accompanying pottery frequently mirror the very animals depicted in the geoglyphs. A person buried near a giant spider glyph might be wrapped in a shroud embroidered with spiders, creating a direct symbolic link between the individual, the artifact, and the landscape. This suggests a holistic worldview where art, ritual, and death were inseparable. The desert was not just a canvas for the living, it was a vast, open-air temple for the dead, a permanent memorial ensuring that the ancestors remained a visible, active part of the community's geography and spiritual life. The lines ensured that the dead were never forgotten, their memory literally mapped onto the world, guiding the living and the departed alike on their eternal journeys. One of the most elegant and practical theories for solving the construction puzzle doesn't require hot air balloons or alien intervention, but something far simpler and readily available to the Nazca people: the reflective power of water. This idea, often called the mirror theory, suggests that the ancient engineers used still pools of water or highly polished reflective surfaces to create a primitive but effective projection system, allowing them to view their progress from a simulated elevated perspective during the construction process. In the stark dryness of the desert, water would have been the most precious of commodities, but for a project of such immense spiritual and communal importance, dedicating a small amount for a sacred purpose would have been a meaningful sacrifice. The theory proposes that shallow, wide basins were strategically placed at key vantage points around the construction site. By angling these pools or using flat, reflective sheets of polished mineral or metal, the workers could capture a reflection of the emerging glyph from a low angle, effectively compressing the vertical distance and providing a distorted but usable overhead view of their work. This would have functioned like a giant, natural camera obscura, projecting an inverted but coherent image of the colossal design that could be checked for accuracy and symmetry as the teams of workers moved stones and scraped the earth. The feasibility of this method is supported by the Nazca's known technological capabilities. They were master metalworkers producing alloys like gold and tembaga, which could be polished to a high mirror-like shine. Similarly, they had access to obsidian, a volcanic glass that can be polished into an excellent reflector. Even without these materials, a simple, wide, and perfectly still pool of water in the calm desert air would have provided a serviceable reflective surface, especially during the early morning or late evening when the light was soft and shadows helped define the forms. A team of directors or master surveyors could have stationed themselves at these reflective points, using the image to shout corrections or signal with flags to the workers below, coordinating the massive effort with a real-time, albeit abstract, reference guide. This method elegantly bridges the gap between the undeniable need for an aerial perspective and the lack of any physical evidence for complex flying machines, offering a solution that is both technologically appropriate for the time and poetically resonant with the culture's deep reverence for water. Critics of the mirror theory point out the significant limitations of using reflections for such precise work. The images would have been small, distorted by the curvature of the water or the imperfections in the reflective surface, and subject to disruption by the slightest wind or vibration. Directing a project of that scale using a shaky, inverted reflection in a pool of water would have been an exercise in frustration, likely introducing more errors than it corrected. Furthermore, no archaeological evidence such as post holes for basins, remnants of polished reflectors, or depressions consistent with large, permanent water containers has been found at the site. However, the theory's true value may lie not in its literal practicality as a surveying tool, but in its potential ritual significance. Even if the reflected image was too imperfect for precise engineering, its symbolic power would have been immense. The act of capturing the giant form of a deity in a sacred pool of water could have been a central part of the construction ceremony itself, a magical act that connected the earthly creation with its spiritual counterpart in the reflective realm. It transforms the process from mere labor into a profound ritual where the mirror didn't just show the workers what they were building, but showed the gods that their image was being faithfully honored on earth. What if the giant birds etched into the Peruvian desert were more than just spiritual symbols? A compelling theory suggests that some of these avian figures served as a massive, permanent almanac, their forms and positions encoding crucial knowledge about the migration patterns of real bird species, information that was absolutely vital for the survival of the Nazca people. In an environment where timing was everything, knowing precisely when certain birds arrived or departed could signal the coming of rains, the time to plant crops, or the beginning of a seasonal food source. The Nazca, being astute observers of their world, would have intimately understood these natural cycles, and it stands to reason that this practical, life-sustaining knowledge would be reflected in their most ambitious cultural project. Take, for example, the magnificent condor glyph. With its immense wingspan and powerful presence, the Andean condor is a bird of high altitudes, often descending into lower valleys and coastal regions during specific times of the year, particularly in the winter months. Its arrival could have been a harbinger of cooler weather or shifts in air currents that preceded seasonal changes. By creating a colossal image of the condor, the Nazca may have been marking its significance in their annual calendar, a permanent reminder etched into the earth of when to expect this majestic scavenger and the ecological shifts it represented. Similarly, the graceful hummingbird, a figure we've discussed in spiritual terms, is also a creature of incredibly precise migration. Different species of hummingbirds arrive in specific regions with almost clockwork regularity, following the bloom of certain flowers they rely on for nectar. For an agricultural society, the hummingbird's arrival could have been a highly reliable, natural indicator that specific plants were about to flower, signaling an optimal time for planting or harvest. The presence of this tiny, energetic bird in the vast desert thus becomes a symbol of perfect timing, its image a massive, community-wide memo about the rhythm of life. This theory beautifully merges the practical with the sacred. A bird's migration wasn't just a biological event. It was a moment of alignment between the animal world, the celestial cycles, and the needs of humanity. The act of observing and recording these patterns through geoglyphs elevates this practical knowledge to a divine science. The bird figures become more than just pictures. They are hieroglyphs in a landscape-sized text, each one a chapter detailing the relationship between a specific species, a time of year, and an action the community needed to take. This transforms the entire plateau into a kind of library of ecological knowledge, a sacred archive where the flight paths of birds were forever linked to the survival of a civilization. It suggests the Nazca viewed themselves not as separate from nature, but as active participants in a complex ecological dialogue, using their art to honor and remember the most important voices in that conversation. Yet for all their beauty and mystery, the very existence of the Nazca Lines hinges on a remarkable and almost miraculous geological secret hidden right beneath the surface. The desert floor here is not merely a blank slate of sand. It has been engineered by nature itself into a perfect, self-preserving canvas. This unique canvas is composed of a fascinating three-layer sandwich that has protected these artworks for 2 millennia. The top layer consists of a pavement of dark, reddish-brown pebbles, rich in iron oxide. Over centuries, these stones have been further darkened by a natural process called desert varnishing, where minerals from the occasional coastal mist slowly coat and patina the rocks. Beneath this dark veneer lies a second layer of much lighter, sandy-colored subsoil, and below that a third, crucial layer, a hard, compact pan of clay-like earth. The genius of the Nazca artists lay in their understanding of this natural composition. They created their designs not by adding material but by subtracting it. Using simple tools, they carefully removed the top layer of dark stones, piling them along the edges of their designs to create small, raised borders. This single act of removal exposed the strikingly lighter subsoil beneath, creating the stark visual contrast that makes the lines visible from the air. But the real magic of preservation is in that third, hidden layer. When the hard-pan subsoil was exposed to the elements, the relentless desert sun and the minimal moisture from the coastal mist baked and hardened this exposed surface, creating a durable, cement-like crust that is highly resistant to erosion. This natural pavement acts as a shield, preventing the wind from scooping out the trenches and stopping the sides from crumbling inward. It effectively locks the design in place, creating a permanent negative image in the earth. This process transformed the desert from a fragile surface into a conserved masterpiece. The climate itself became a partner in this preservation. The Nazca Plateau is one of the driest places on Earth, with an annual rainfall of less than an inch. This profound aridity means there is virtually no water erosion to wash away the carefully arranged stones or carve gullies through the designs. Furthermore, the region is shielded by the Andes Mountains, which block strong, destructive winds from the Amazon. The winds that do cross the plateau are typically gentle and steady, and they play a beneficial role by continuously sweeping away any new sand or dust that might begin to accumulate in the grooves, acting as a silent, perpetual maintenance crew. The survival of each line is a testament to this perfect, delicate balance of geology and climate. A conservationist's dream environment where the very elements that would destroy art elsewhere have become its most dedicated guardians. This challenge of scale leads us to one of the most brilliant demonstrations of Nazca ingenuity, a secret that reveals their true genius was not in mystery but in mathematics. When we look at the vast hummingbird or the perfect spiral from above, we see flawless forms, but we are seeing them from a modern, elevated perspective they never had. The true marvel is that the creators achieved this perfection while standing on the ground, working on a curved, uneven landscape that actively worked to distort their vision. Maintaining perfect proportions across a figure nearly 1,000 feet long on a surface that dips and rolls is a problem that would challenge modern engineers even with laser levels and GPS. The fact that the Nazca accomplished it with sticks and ropes is a breathtaking testament to their sophisticated understanding of geometry and spatial reasoning. Their mastery likely began with a fundamental principle: breaking down immense complexity into manageable, repeatable units. Researchers believe they used a standardized unit of measurement, perhaps based on a specific length of rope or a consistent human pace. This unit became the building block for everything. To scale up a small model, they would have first imposed a grid over their design. Each intersection point on this small grid had a coordinate. They then created a massive corresponding grid on the desert floor, where each square of the small grid was scaled up by a fixed multiple, say 10 or 20 times. Teams of workers would use ropes and stakes to mark these key coordinate points across the undulating terrain. By systematically connecting these points, they could replicate the outline of their design at a colossal scale, ensuring that the proportions of the beak, wing, and tail of a bird remained perfectly in relation to one another, even over hills and across valleys. This method effectively allowed them to plot the figure point by point, transforming an artistic vision into a precise mathematical equation written on the earth. The real magic, however, lies in how they compensated for the curvature of the ground. This is where their skill transcends simple scaling and enters the realm of advanced surveying. To keep a straight line straight over a hill, you cannot simply lay a rope along the ground. The sag of the rope and the shape of the hill would create a curve. The Nazca solution was elegant and brilliant. They used a series of sighting posts to create a straight visual path, not a straight physical path on the ground. They would begin by placing 2 tall stakes at either end of the intended line. A surveyor would then stand behind the first stake, sighting over its top to guide a second team to place a third stake further ahead, moving it left or right until all 3 stakes were in perfect alignment. This process would be repeated stake by stake over the entire distance. The resulting line, when viewed from the starting point, would appear perfectly straight because each stake was on the same sight line, even though the path between them went up and down over the natural contours. The line followed the curve of the Earth visually, not topographically, which is exactly how we perceive its straightness from the air. For their magnificent curves and spirals, they employed a different but equally clever technique. A simple central stake with a long rope would act as a giant compass. Workers would hold the rope taut and walk in a circle, scraping the circumference into the earth. To create a perfect spiral, they would systematically shorten the rope after each revolution. The key to making this work on a slope was understanding that the central stake had to be perfectly vertical. By using a weighted plumb line, a technology well within their reach, they could ensure their central pivot point was true, allowing the rope to sweep a consistent arc regardless of the angle of the hill it was on. This combination of simple tools, grids, sighting stakes, ropes, and plumb lines powered by a profound grasp of geometric principles allowed them to defeat the distorting effects of the landscape. They weren't just artists, they were the ancient world's premier land surveyors, mastering perspective and proportion on a scale that continues to inspire awe and admiration centuries later. While the alignments with solstices and star positions are compelling, the celestial connection might reach even deeper into the realm of rare and spectacular cosmic events. Some researchers propose that the Nazca were not just tracking the steady, predictable dance of the sun and stars, but were also creating permanent records of fleeting, dramatic phenomena that blazed across their night sky. Imagine the sheer awe a pre-modern society would feel witnessing a brilliant comet with a long, shimmering tail, a meteor shower so intense it looked like the stars were falling, or the slow, majestic drift of a visible planet like Venus moving through its cycles. These events were often interpreted as powerful omens, messages from the gods that demanded interpretation and response. The geoglyphs, in this view, could have served as a kind of permanent astronomical ledger, their forms and positions encoding the memory of these celestial spectacles. A particularly fascinating hypothesis links the famous spider glyph to a specific, rare celestial occurrence. The spider's body is drawn with a precise number of lines and segments, and its long, slender legs extend in a specific configuration. Some astronomers have noted that this configuration bears a striking resemblance to the constellation of Orion, but not as it normally appears. Instead, it mirrors the shape of Orion during a specific precessional age, a slow wobble in Earth's axis that changes our view of the stars over a 26,000-year cycle. By etching this specific configuration into the desert, the Nazca may have been marking a monumental moment in this grand celestial clock, a way of freezing a specific astronomical age in time for future generations. This would represent an astronomical understanding of almost unimaginable depth, an awareness of cosmic cycles that span tens of thousands of years. Other lines and shapes might correlate with the paths of planets. Venus, as the brightest morning and evening star, held immense significance for ancient cultures across the Americas. Its cyclical appearances and disappearances were meticulously tracked. Certain long, straight lines on the Nazca Plateau align, not with the sunrise itself, but with the points on the horizon where Venus would first appear as the morning star after a period of invisibility. These lines could have been ceremonial pathways used on the dawn when the planet re-emerged, a physical representation of its return journey. Similarly, the massive trapezoids with their wide, open mouths facing the horizon could have been designed to frame the planet's position at its most extreme northern or southern points in its cycle, turning a simple astronomical observation into a dramatic, architecturally framed event. The most dramatic potential recordings are of transient events. A long, wavy line with a concentrated cluster of stones at one end could be a depiction of a comet, its tail stretching across the sky. A series of overlapping circles or spirals might represent the observed retrograde motion of Mars, where the planet appears to loop backwards in its path across the stars, a motion that puzzled ancient astronomers worldwide. A sudden, intense meteor shower, like the Leonids, might have been commemorated with a glyph showing a series of striking lines radiating from a central point, mimicking shooting stars emanating from a single radiant. By inscribing these events into the landscape, the Nazca were doing more than just making a calendar. They were building a sacred archive of the cosmos, turning unpredictable celestial drama into a permanent earthly monument. It was their way of taming the chaos of the heavens, of asserting that even the most fleeting and powerful messages from the gods could be captured, understood, and remembered forever in the very fabric of their world. Scattered across the vastness of the Nazca Desert, hidden in the very grooves and in points of the geoglyphs, lie some of the most compelling clues to their purpose, the silent, material remains of the people who created them. While the lines themselves are awe-inspiring, it is the discovery of small, intentional offerings and ceremonial artifacts that truly breathes life into the theories of ritual use, transforming these abstract shapes from mysterious markings into a vibrant landscape of active worship. Archaeologists carefully excavating at the terminals of long lines and within the confines of the great trapezoids have unearthed a fascinating inventory of devotional objects. These aren't the grand treasures of a king's tomb, but the humble, powerful leftovers of communal faith pottery, shards from beautifully painted vessels, often depicting the same animal figures seen in the giant glyphs, delicate seashells, particularly the spiny oyster known as spondylus, imported at great cost from the warm waters of coastal Ecuador, fragments of textiles, and the remnant food offerings like maize and squash. Perhaps most tellingly, they have found small, carefully constructed altars or cairns of stones, often associated with traces of fire and the ash from burnt offerings. These are not random losses, they are the material signature of repeated, purposeful ceremony. Each type of offering reveals a different layer of the Nazca spiritual dialogue. The spondylus shell is particularly significant. In Andean cosmology, this vibrant orange-red shell was intrinsically linked to water, fertility, and rain. Its color mirrored the life-giving forces of the sun, and its origin in the warm ocean connected it to the rain-bringing currents and the divine powers of the sea. To bring such a precious object from hundreds of miles away and deliberately place it at the end of a line pointing toward the mountains was a profound sacrifice, a direct petition to the gods to exchange this symbol of watery abundance for the real thing. The broken pottery, meanwhile, speaks to rituals of consumption and libation. Vessels may have been used to hold chicha, a fermented maize beer, which was shared communally to solidify social bonds before being offered to the earth by shattering the cup. The designs on these vessels acted as a symbolic reinforcement. Drinking from a cup painted with a hummingbird while standing before the giant hummingbird glyph would have been a potent act of identification with the spirit of that creature, a way of internalizing its power and essence during the ceremony. The placement of these offerings provides a crucial map of how the geoglyphs were actually used. They are consistently found at the narrow ends of trapezoids, which would have served as natural focal points for a ceremony, almost like an altar at the front of a cathedral. They cluster at the endpoints of long straight lines, marking these spots as destinations worthy of a final, significant offering after a long processional walk. They are also found at the vertices of geometric shapes and near the mouths or heads of the animal figures. This pattern of deposition suggests a highly choreographed ritual landscape. We can envision a procession moving along a straight line, led by priests or shamans, finally arriving at a specific point to make an offering, or a community gathering within a vast trapezoid, all facing the narrow end where a shaman conducted a rite, with individuals stepping forward to place their personal votive objects into a small fire or upon a pile of stones. These physical artifacts are the undeniable proof that the lines were not static art to be admired from a distance, but a dynamic stage, activated again and again by the people who built them, their faith made tangible in shell, clay, and ash. But perhaps one of the most profound and sobering secrets hidden within the Nazca Lines is not about the stars or the gods, but about the very environment that both sustained and threatened this remarkable civilization. Emerging research suggests these monumental geoglyphs might have served as a massive, stone-etched ledger, encoding crucial information about historical climate patterns, prolonged drought cycles, and the environmental changes that ultimately shaped their destiny. In a landscape where a single season without rain could mean catastrophe, tracking and predicting these long-term cycles wasn't a matter of academic interest, it was a desperate fight for survival. The Nazca people were master hydrologists, their lives dictated by the erratic flow of water from the Andes and the fragile subterranean aquifers beneath their feet. It stands to reason that their most ambitious cultural project would reflect this deepest of concerns, transforming the desert into a historical archive of their ever-changing world. The most compelling evidence for this theory lies in the patterns of construction itself. Archaeologists have noticed that the creation of the geoglyphs wasn't a continuous, steady effort, but occurred in distinct bursts of activity that correlate with known periods of climate fluctuation. During extended wet periods when water was more plentiful and agriculture thrived, the society had the surplus labor and resources to embark on these massive communal projects. The desert floor would have been bustling with teams of people, clearing new lines and expanding the sacred landscape. Conversely, during severe, multi-generational droughts like the one that archaeological evidence suggests struck around the year 500 AD, the construction seems to have dramatically increased, but with a different, more desperate purpose. In times of extreme environmental stress, the creation of the glyphs likely shifted from a celebratory practice to a form of mass supplication. The act of building itself became the most powerful prayer, a communal plea etched directly into the earth, begging the mountain gods and water deities to relent and send the life-giving rains. The lines became a physical manifestation of their anxiety, a project so vast it could only be undertaken with the collective energy of a people fighting for their very existence. The specific forms of the geoglyphs might also tell a climate story. The predominance of water-associated animals, the whale from the deep ocean, the monkey from the rain-soaked Amazon, takes on a new, poignant meaning during periods of drought. Creating a giant spider whose web catches the morning dew, or a hummingbird which follows the bloom of water-dependent flowers, could have been an act of sympathetic magic. It was a way of drawing the essence of these moist, fertile environments into their parched homeland, a permanent invocation of everything they were missing. The long, straight lines that point toward distant mountain peaks and known water sources can be seen not just as ritual pathways, but as a form of ancient GIS mapping, a permanent record of vital hydrological knowledge passed down through generations. In an oral culture where detailed information could be lost over time, these giant stone arrows ensured that even after a century, the location of a critical aquifer would never be forgotten. The entire Nazca Plateau, therefore, might be the most ambitious environmental textbook ever created, its chapters written in stone and sand, detailing the intimate relationship between a people and the precarious ecosystem they called home. This profound connection to their environment leads us to one of the greatest and most tragic puzzles surrounding the Nazca Lines. Why did this incredible tradition, so central to their identity and survival, vanish completely? The knowledge of how to create and likely how to fully interpret these geoglyphs wasn't just forgotten. It was severed, leaving one of humanity's most spectacular art forms without a living legacy. Understanding this cultural discontinuity requires looking beyond the desert and into the perfect storm of social and environmental collapse that ultimately overwhelmed this ingenious civilization. Around the year 500 AD, the Nazca world began to unravel. Archaeological evidence points to a series of catastrophic climate events, including a devastating mega-drought that may have lasted for decades, crippling their sophisticated hydraulic systems and agricultural base. This prolonged environmental stress was likely followed by torrential rains and flooding from a super El Niño event, which would have scoured the landscape, destroying farmland and washing away entire settlements. The very water they had prayed for on such a monumental scale may have arrived with a destructive fury that their systems couldn't withstand, a cruel irony etched into the geological record. This environmental catastrophe would have triggered a profound social and religious crisis. The foundation of the Nazca power structure was almost certainly a priesthood or elite class that claimed the ability to communicate with the gods and control the weather. The very individuals who would have orchestrated the construction of the geoglyphs as their most powerful tool of intercession. When their monumental prayers carved across the entire desert consistently failed to bring rain or prevent destruction, the faith of the common people would have shattered. The authority of the ruling class would have collapsed along with the ecosystem, leading to social unrest, the abandonment of ceremonial centers, and a complete loss of confidence in the old ways. In this struggle for sheer survival, the meticulous, generation-spanning knowledge required to create new geoglyphs would have become a low priority. The cultural engine that drove this tradition simply broke down, and the specialized surveyors, artists, and ritual specialists who held the secrets likely died without passing them on to a society now focused exclusively on finding food and water. The void left by the Nazca's decline was eventually filled by very different cultures, primarily the Wari Empire, a powerful, expansionist state from the highlands. The Wari brought with them a completely distinct set of cultural values, artistic styles, and religious practices. Their focus was on terrestrial power, administrative control, and high-altitude warfare, not on the large-scale desert art of their predecessors. The Wari expressed their power through different means: sprawling architectural complexes, intricate tapestry tunics, and distinct ceramic styles. They had no cultural or religious need to continue the geoglyph tradition. In fact, they may have actively viewed it as a symbol of the failed old order, a testament to gods who had been proven powerless. The knowledge wasn't just lost, it became irrelevant within the new cultural paradigm that came to dominate the region. The lines were left to the mercy of the desert, their meaning fading from memory with each passing generation until they were just strange markings on a landscape, their creators and their purpose becoming a mystery even to the people who later lived among them. The journey from a mysterious desert marking to a globally recognized treasure was formally cemented in 1994, when the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, inscribed the Nazca Lines onto its prestigious World Heritage List. This designation was far more than an honorary title. It was a critical turning point that fundamentally transformed the fate of these ancient wonders, providing an international mandate for their protection and a powerful new framework for their study. The status immediately elevated the lines from a Peruvian national monument to a site of outstanding value to all humanity, a part of the world's collective heritage. This global recognition came with a surge of resources and attention, channeling much-needed funding into conservation projects, scientific research, and the development of sustainable management plans. It placed the Nazca Lines on the same stage as wonders like the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Great Barrier Reef, affirming their significance and ensuring that their preservation became an international responsibility, not just a local one. This official recognition also acted as a powerful deterrent against threats like mining encroachment and unchecked development, giving the Peruvian government a stronger legal and diplomatic foundation to defend the site from destruction. With this elevated status came a dramatic increase in global interest, turning the remote desert into a must-see destination for travelers from every corner of the planet. Tourism, while a vital source of revenue for conservation and the local economy, introduced a complex new set of challenges. The early days of unrestricted access, where visitors could freely wander across the fragile geoglyphs, are thankfully over, but the sheer volume of foot traffic around sensitive areas and the constant takeoffs and landings of sightseeing aircraft present a persistent risk. The very act of loving the lines to death became a real concern. The UNESCO designation forced a necessary and difficult conversation about sustainable tourism, leading to the construction of a permanent viewing tower along the Pan-American Highway and strict regulations that confine visitors to designated paths. All aerial tours are now carefully regulated, with specified flight paths designed to minimize their impact on the delicate desert canvas. This delicate balancing act, welcoming the world while protecting the site from it, is the central, ongoing challenge of management, a constant effort to ensure that wonder does not lead to wear and tear. Perhaps the most significant impact of World Heritage status has been the catalyst it provided for advanced, multidisciplinary research. The international spotlight and associated funding streams have enabled scientists to employ cutting-edge technology that was once unimaginable. The use of drones equipped with high-resolution LiDAR and multispectral scanners has revolutionized surveying, allowing archaeologists to create incredibly detailed three-dimensional maps of the entire pampa and detect scores of previously unknown, faded geoglyphs without ever setting foot on them. Satellite monitoring now provides a constant vigil over the vast area, quickly identifying new threats from illegal mining or potential damage from rare weather events. This technological arms race in conservation has even extended to the microscopic level, with scientists analyzing the unique microbial crust that forms on the desert floor to better understand the natural preservation process and how it might be disrupted. UNESCO framework encourages collaboration between international experts, bringing together geologists, climatologists, archaeologists, and engineers to form a holistic understanding of the site and the myriad factors that threaten its survival. Despite these tremendous advances, the challenges are relentless and evolving. Climate change poses an insidious new threat, as the increasing frequency of extreme weather events in Peru disrupts the delicate hyper-arid equilibrium that has preserved the lines for 2 millennia. Sudden, heavy downpours, once a near impossibility here, now carve destructive gullies through the ancient designs, as witnessed in recent years. The economic pressures that drive illegal gold mining in the surrounding hills continue to escalate, causing deforestation and polluting the watershed, which in turn alters the erosion patterns on the plain. The Peruvian government and dedicated conservators are engaged in a continuous battle, employing a mix of ancient and space-age techniques. From teams of volunteers who carefully sweep dust from the grooves with brooms, just as Maria Reiche did, to deploying moisture sensors and satellite surveillance to monitor the site's health in real time. The UNESCO World Heritage status is not a finish line. It is the starting gun for an endless marathon of vigilance, a promise to future generations that we will continue the work of those who came before, ensuring that these whispers from the past remain audible in the desert for centuries to come.